accidentally got it working. It didn't know why it was working, something like that. So if I go head here into my project, I'm just going to right click on one of these guys, and I'm going to say view, and I want to say view in Finder, something like that. Reveal in Finder. So it's probably like reveal in file system or something like that on Windows. So I click on this dude, and it opens it up in here. So this is where my project is on disk. Now I'm going to go up one level. So on a Mac, I hit Command. On a PC, it's probably Control. And I can choose the folder here. I'm just going to go up. Actually, this should be the top level I should be in. Oh, no, it's not. It's in the app level. I just happened to name it. It was in a folder called AwesomeFat. All right, so here at the app level, you see how we have this file here called google-services.json? See that file right there? That dude is the file that gets created when we originally went to Firebase, blah, 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 this guy here. And whichever one of these things you click on, it's the thing that gets created when you click that button to connect your app to Firebase. Okay, that JSON file gets generated then. And if we were to open up that JSON file, I'll go ahead and I'm going to open it up in text edit, actually, because I had a weird thing with Adam earlier, and I'm afraid of it happening again and crashing the computer. But so this is just a big JSON document, and inside here it has like what my unique project number ID is. Here's the Firebase URL, you know, things that it will allow my app to directly talk to my specific Firebase project. Make sense? So this JSON file is what makes your Firebase app talk to the correct Firebase actual application. So if you started with my project as a base for this week's homework, your JSON file knows how to talk to my database, not your database. So you have a couple of options. What you could do is you could take your old project from last week, open up the JSON file, basically just copy it all, go into my JSON file, overwrite it with that stuff. Now you're talking to your project in the database. All right, that makes sense? Alternatively, you could also delete it from here, and I think that Ani saw that if she deleted it, it didn't actually give you a new option to reconnect. Somewhere it had already flagged for reconnecting, right? So you could delete the file, and at that point, no matter what this guy says, you're no longer really connected, because that JSON file is a really integral part for your app being able to talk to Firebase. So at that point, what you can do is you can go into Firebase here, and I'm going to go into, let me spread this out a little bit. You're going to go into settings here, and we're going to go into project settings. And down here, you should have something called your apps. And I wonder why I have two, but I think this might have been, you probably only have one. I think this might have been when I was trying to do it from both sides. I think I showed you originally. But in any case, you'll only have one thing here. And here's this Google JSON, Google Services JSON file. Just download this, and you will put it into the, let me take you back where it needs to go. So it's in the main folder. So here's CSC518 list example. And inside that, you have a folder called app. It goes inside that app folder. So if you drop that in your app folder, then I would probably close Visual or Android Studio and relaunch it and let it go ahead and do the great old resync crap. And then it should now be talking to your database. That makes sense? So I think that's, if you had issues with that, this file right here, which got automatically generated for you when you clicked the magical button over here that said connect my app to blah, blah. That's the guy that gets generated that tells your Android app how to talk to your project in Firebase. Go ahead.
If you delete the database from both the JSON file and then from here, from the dashboard, it'll do the same thing.
So what do you want me to do?
It doesn't So yeah, so if you delete no, it's the app hookup.
I see. So if I go in here to this,
Yeah.
and I decide I want to disconnect these apps,
Right.
is there like a delete? Delete this app.
Yeah, there.
Then what does it do? Out here it says it's no longer connected.
So yeah, so if you delete it there and then delete the JSON from the Finder folder.
Then this guy will say it's no longer connected. You can hit the button and it'll do its thing again. Okay, so that's doing it from the other side. So he said you could delete the JSON, then you can go in here and delete your app, this guy right here. And what that should do is it should then make this button appear again.
Well, the trick's going to be if they download yours, they're not going to have access to the database to...
Oh, to delete that. Yeah. So you got to go back to what I did. Really, probably the easiest solution if you're just trying to keep things as clean as possible is if you already have a project that talks to your database and you want to use my project as a starting point to talk to your database, just open up the JSON file. I think I already have text edit open, don't I? Oh, did I? Just open up this JSON file in your project. Copy it all, and then paste it into my project's JSON file and save it. Now you have a local JSON file that knows all the right things to say to Firebase to make it connect to your database. That make sense? Okie dokie. So any questions about that side of things before I go on and talk about the infinite loop dealy? All right, so let's talk about the infinite loop dealy thing for a few minutes. This. You hate when computers can't keep up. We'll draw this picture here. All right, so I want to show you here. So we have our database up here at the top level, right? And then down here we have our app guy. All right, and of course our app is that color. Didn't I think Ani told us this is definitely magenta last class, right?
No, that was you.
Oh, it always is. I say all the great things. All right, so we'll make database green, yellow. Yellow feels right. All right, so we have our database up there. We have our app down here. Now, what we're interested in doing, we talked about last time the patterns of communication. We talked about somewhere in here, did we talk about asynchronous versus asynchronous versus synchronous communication? Did I talk about that last time? Seems like it should be in here, at least. Oh, okay. Well, let's give us a nice little slide for that guy. Since it's, so we're going to call this guy patterns of communication. All right, so we have asynchronous and we have synchronous. All right, so asynchronous communication, maybe kind of the computer programmer lingo for this would be this is non-blocking communication. As opposed to synchronous, we would say this is blocking communication. And this is going to be a pretty important thing for us to discuss today. Out of curiosity, how many of you ran into what seemed to be the weird infinite loop issue? 4 1/4? 4 1/4. All right, so we'll talk about what that kind of means. But I want to kind of almost like we're going to put on a little play. And Shadi will probably help me, but as will everybody else. So, oh, good. All right. So, when we say asynchronous non-blocking, what this really says is this generally. Let's kind of put it in computer science terms. We're going to say this spawns off a thread of execution that runs some portion of your program. We could maybe say in the background, not necessarily in the background, but it's separate from the rest of your program running, while the rest of your program keeps going. Whereas blocking, this says the current logic keeps the rest of the program from continuing until the logic completes, something like that. All right, so, and where this comes into play for us in our picture, where's my picture? Inside of my app, I created a nice little asynchronous thing here. Call this, so we're going to say async value event listener. All right, and that guy should be green, white, green. All right, so this guy's our asynchronous value event listener. Tell me what you think this guy does. What does our value event listener actually accomplish?
Listens for value events in the database.
Okay. What are examples of value events?
Changes to the database.
Okay, so any change to the database? So anytime this database changes, we have a little function off of this guy. What's it called? On data change?
Yeah.
Okay, so this value event listener has a little function called on data change. So whenever anything up here in our database changed related to a specific reference. So when we set up this value event listener, we connected it to a certain reference in our database. Now when I say reference in a database, let's add another slide here. What is a reference? What's a reference to our Firebase database?
If it's the, after you get the database instance, it refers to some node that you attach to inside of the database. So some JSON child, it could be root, it could be something below it.
A specific location within our database. That is to say, not necessarily the database as a whole, but a granular place within it. Potentially multiple granular places within the database, right? We can have multiple references. We could say, I'm interested in patient records changing. I'm interested in credit cards changing. I'm interested in loyalty programs changing. But I might want to do different things when each of those things change. So I'm actually going to create 3 separate value event listeners. One of them is going to say, look, I'm going to scream at you whenever your credit cards change. Or I'm going to scream at you whenever your loyalty programs change. Instead of saying I'm going to connect it to the top level database and say, scream at me when anything changes. Can that make sense? So we have the flexibility of saying I'm interested in certain aspects of my database, not necessarily all of the database. All right, cool with that? All right, so we want to talk about this value event listener thing here because this guy, notice I put the word async in here, which obviously I'm just doing that to look cool, but we already saw what async meant. This is non-blocking. That means that when we spawn off an asynchronous function, we're saying I am not preventing the rest of my program from continuing to run. Program can just keep cooking. But I'm going to do something we can kind of think of. I wrote what in the background. So I'm going to do something in the background. In this case, the value event listener is saying, look, I'm going to keep an eye on the place in the database that you told me you were interested in. And whenever I notice a change to that place in the database, I'm going to let you know. Okay, that's our observer design pattern. We talked about it last time. The observer design pattern says it's a good idea to be productive while we wait for some event to occur that potentially may never occur, right? If your database never actually changes, it won't occur. Or in several of your cases, if your database changes every single time that you call on data changes often is what happens. All right, so what was happening for a lot of folks here, so this is Value Event Listener. Our app registers one time. Okay, so if we kind of think about the cadence here, let's call this the pattern of DB event listening, something like that. I know that listening only has one N in it, but it seems like the last 3 or 4 days I've always wanted to put 2 to 5 N's in it. Have you ever had that?
I think it's been the last 2 days. I think it's been like the last 4 or 5.
Really? So she's like stupid shaming me. Man, that 10 days just made the next program harder. All right. Actually, she's still wrong. It's been way longer than 5 years. I haven't been able to spell for a long time. All right, so pattern of DB event listening. So the idea here is that I'm gonna just kind of make our steps. We create a DB. I'm gonna say pointer. That's our initial database reference. Then from there, we optionally create, I'm gonna call it sub-references to portions of our database. We can add a value event listener. See, it's like muscle memory. I know it was only one N, but I want to put so many of them. Okay, we can add a value event listener to any ref or subref, which will alert us when a change occurs. Okay, so that's kind of the pattern of communication. We do not need a value event listener. We only need a value event listener. And there's some other listeners too. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, I saw that.
I promise you I know how to spell it, but I can never do it. It's like it's magic. Was it the cheerleading thing? Was this what's this called? Spirit Fingers. That's right. I learned about that. What's the name of that movie? Bring It On. Wasn't there a Bring It On 2?
There's like a Bring It On 2, 3, 4, 5.
Really? I think I only saw the first one with Dunst, the girl from from Spider-Man. That was like a long time ago, wasn't it? Like 15 years? Jeez, I'm so old. All right, now I sit in front of groups of people with a backpack on. Because I just don't care. All right, so we only need a value event listener when we care about changes to a portion of the DB. Now, it's important to recognize that just because we become alerted that there was a change doesn't mean we have to act upon it, right? We could just have our value event listener scream at us every single time something changed, and we could just say, cool. Maybe we print it out. Maybe we just kind of want to know what the JSON looks like, that kind of stuff. But we don't actually have to respond to it. Okay, so if we want to respond to a change in the DB, we write our logic within on data. Was it change or changed? Which is the two? put it in core, didn't I?
No, it's in
You did.
main,
Are you lying?
main activity.
Yeah, on data change, this guy. So if we want to respond to a change in the DB, we write our logic within on data change inside the value event listener. Okay. This function gets called every single time the database changes, or that portion of the database changes. Every single time. Okay? So a really dangerous pattern that several of you got into was this. Inside of onDataChanged, what did you do? You got the new data or whatever, and maybe you said, okay, I'm going to add this to my linked list, right? My local linked list. And maybe you had the old version of adding to your local linked list, which also wrote it to the database. So if I had a function, we'll draw the culprit here. So we're going to have a function called add credit card, because that one's shorter to write than loyalty program. So add credit card, maybe before add credit card added CC to local linked list, but maybe it also added to Firebase, which was the big no-no in your case. All right, so if you had a function called add credit card that did the job of adding something to the local, and maybe you did something additional than this. You added to local DB, maybe you added it to Firebase, and then you let the array adapter know it updated, that little thing, notify of data change or whatever the function name was. So if those are the three things your add credit card thing does, what will this part of it accomplish?
That'll trigger off the async event. So
Again. So if I'm that on data change, I'm that asynchronous event, okay, and something in the database changes. I'm like, something changed. So what do? Realistically, what we're trying to do there is we are trying to add that stuff to our local linked list so that we can show in our list view the updated crap, right? Okay. But if inside that function you're saying, I got a bunch of changes. So when the thing first, it's even worse when your app first loads. It's like, oh, well, I didn't even do anything, right? Your app first loads. You get a whole bunch of these credit cards or loyalty programs, whatever, and then you call this function called add loyalty program or add credit card, forgetting that your current version of add loyalty program or add credit card actually writes it to the database, because it's the guy you wrote for your add button on your add loyalty program and your add credit card page, where you put in a couple of pieces of information, you hit the add button, and what should it do? It should add it to Firebase. You're using that same function. So if I'm the responder to that, if I'm on that on data changed whatever thing, and the very first thing I do is say, here's a whole bunch of credit cards that I need to add to my list view. My list view is driven by an array adapter that's connected to my linked list. So how do I add stuff to my linked list? Well, I call my add loyalty program function. Well, sure, it adds stuff to your linked list, but what else does it do? Writes to the database. And when you write to the database, what happens?
it adds to the linked list.
Database changes. When database changes, what gets called? On data changed. So this guy gets called again. What does he do? He adds more stuff to the linked list, adds more stuff to the database, on data changed. Add to linked list, add to the database change. Add to linked list, add to the database change. Over and over and over again. See how that works? So it's a pretty interesting infinite loop, because you're actually stuck in an infinite loop related to an asynchronous call. It's a function that you kind of just spawned off as just kind of do some listening for me in the background. Don't bother me unless there's something I need to be bothered about. But then your response to that this guy right here, if you want to respond to that change of the database, that's what you write inside of the on change right here. So what am I doing right now inside of here? I'm going through all of the data snapshots in the children of my top level snapshot, right? Because I'm listening currently to the credit card endpoint, and each of my credit cards has a unique ID, and we're going to deal with those unique IDs today, okay? So what I need to do is I need to say, give me my collection of unique IDs. So each of these DS's here will be a name value pair where the name, or key value pair, where the key is that crazy looking string, and the value is a JSON thing that becomes our credit card class, okay? So this is going to say, here's my data snapshot of the current credit cards endpoint in my database. This guy says, for each child of my credit card endpoint, which is a key value pair where the key is unique ID and the value is a JSON object, what am I going to do? I'm going to get the value, so this is my JSON object from there, and I'm going to say that guy is actually a representation of the credit card class. And my credit card class needs to be serializable, so if I go in here, I've advertised this dude as being serializable. And what are the rules for being serializable? What do I have to do in order to make a class serializable?
Everything has to be public.
Okay, all fields need to be public. And I have to have an empty constructor. Those two things, right? Okay, so public fields, empty constructor, and those two work hand in hand. Go ahead.
So I had a question. I didn't watch the video all the way through, but when you were talking about this, you talked about.
Weren't you here live?
I was. I'm not. Memory's not so good. Remember you asked me how old I was? It's just part of the old age.
And how old were you again?
36. Yeah. So.
It's not good, dude.
I know.
Well, I was 36. That was already bad. Now I'm this.
Awesome.
I'm wearing a backpack. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
That's cool. I look forward to embarrassing people as I'm especially my family. So when you implement runnable in the example last week, you had to have a public void run.
Yeah.
So does it depend on what you're implementing, like what the requirements are inside of your class?
Correct. So if we were to put that kind of in like put in a slide or something, when we implement something, in fact, we'll just say, when we implement something, we are, and when I'm talking about implement here, I'm talking about it in terms of using this word right there, implements. Okay. What we're effectively doing is we are agreeing to follow the rules of an interface, where we may have to write 0 or more specific methods. We may have to have specific fields. We may have to have specific security settings for fields, etc. We're basically saying, I am going to be compatible with this set of standards. So an interface sets up a set of standards, and I'm saying I'm going to be compatible with that. So with runnable, which I use the example, that's from creating threads. Adhering to the set of standards for runnable says you must have a public void run method.
And that's the only.
Doesn't matter what you're going to do. I mean, you
don't
don't know what they're going to do with that. All you're doing is promising there'll be one.
That's per the interface. The interface says this is what you got to do.
That's it. So runnable is very, very, very directly related to the thread class. So if you extend the thread class, so you can choose to implement runnable, or you can choose to extend the thread class. Extending the thread class effectively means you're already implementing runnable, because the thread class has a public void run function that doesn't do anything. But chances are you probably want your thread to do something, right? So what you would do is you would override the public void run function of the thread and create your own version of it that does the crap that you want to have happen when that thread starts. So when you extend a thread, what you're really saying is, I want this magical function that comes with threads called start. And that magical function knows all the little spells and stuff like that that have to happen in order for a thread of execution to occur within the Java virtual machine. That's specialized stuff that you don't want to mess with. All right, so you're going to say, look, I am a thread, but I'm a mic thread. And mic threads, they have a run method that does something very micy, right?
Where's the backpack?
Yeah, where's backpack, does a bunch of other borderline things. But at the end of the day, all the stuff I do, I've defined inside of a function called public void run. I'm not touching that start function because the thread has the magical start function that knows how to spawn a thread off and get things going. All right, so we can choose to write we can choose to implement runnable, which is very directly related to threads, and all that says is you have to write a run method. Or we can choose to extend thread, which is a different model. That's the inheritance model. We can say, look, I want to be a thread. I just kind of want to do something special inside of my run method instead of the nothingness that the default thread does. So in that case, you're effectively saying, I already implement the runnable interface because that's what threads do. Threads implement runnable. But rather than just deal with the local run method that comes with threads, I'll write my own version of that so that this thread does Mikey stuff, backpacky stuff, right? But at the end of the day, this idea of implementing something effectively just says you are agreeing to adhere to a standard, and you will be policed. Because Java will scream at you. If you say that you are implementing, heck, we'll just do it here. If I just throw onto the end of this, I say I want to implement runnable, okay, it's going to scream at me. If I highlight over this, it says, must either be declared abstract or implement abstract method run for the runnable class. So as soon as I say I'm implementing this to you, because you can implement multiple interfaces. You can say I'm serializable, I'm also runnable. So one pattern we see with interfaces is they tend to have an able in them. That's kind of our telltale naming convention sign that guy's probably an interface. Not a that was a good pop. I heard that from up here. Man, I wish I could have those pops. Like you can't even walk right, then all of a sudden you All right, so you can implement more than one interface. I'm just saying I'm going to adhere by these standards. I'm also going to adhere by these standards. You maybe need to be a little careful there with not having more than one. Like if this guy says you have to implement a certain, like a run method, and this guy says you also have to implement a run method, that could be okay as long as those run methods indicate the same thing. You're doing the same stuff in those run methods, otherwise you might start doing some weird stuff. But in any case, it's perfectly reasonable for you to say that I'm gonna adhere to two different standards here. And right now it's not happy with me because I've said I will allow Java to police me relative to the runnable interface, yet I haven't adhered to that standard as it dictates.
So we're doing this in order to pass the class to the, what was it, get value, I can't remember, but the handler basically, or the...
Well, making this class serializable is what's required to store an object in Firebase.
The blank constructor. No, I got that from the homework.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to figure out why it required that for serialization. I guess I didn't understand. I read
Well, Firebase is going to rely on the fact that you have public fields and that you have a no argument constructor. Why is that? Well, the public fields are there for when you go to write to the database. Actually, they're there for both sides. So if I have an object, a credit card object, I can take that object and say, maybe it's called CC. I can say CC dot name, CC dot start date, CC dot min spent. If those are all public, I can directly access those fields. So by making this guy serializable, you're saying that I will have all of my fields that I want to be able to serialize will be public.
It's structure validation. It's guaranteeing that
you're guaranteeing the mechanism that stores in Firebase that you have the stuff that you want to store will be public.
Okay. It knows it wouldn't compile
Well, it'll compile. It just won't store anything. Yeah, I mean, because it'll only grab the public fields. So if you made only one of your fields public in your credit card and made all the rest of them private, even if you have getters and setters, it'll only store one value.
So
only the public one.
Can you declare a private variable inside of the class right now, or will it squawk at you?
Well, I think it'll be okay. Is my guy currently doing credit cards or loyalty programs?
You're in credit cards right now.
Well, I know that's where I am, but what does my guy currently support?
Credits,
Credit cards.
yeah.
Okay. So I have this private string LOL that I'm not going to do anything with, right? Oh, am I back to that guy? The crazy Zoom thingy? So it's storing those pieces of information, but if I go to my database, is that this guy? Am I already in there? Is that, oh, that's not this class. I have a different database for this class, right? I have this guy. Actually storing. It did not look like it actually stored. Did it try to store? It's stored locally. Where's my add credit card? Activity, submit button, create the blah, blah, blah. Core, add credit card. Oh, yeah, it doesn't actually store it to the database right now. I would need to store it to the database. So,
Well, CC doesn't take that as a parameter, right?
well, see, this is the instance of credit card that I created. So from here, where's my add?
You don't have a database reference in core yet.
Correct. So here in on submit button pressed, I'm creating an instance of a credit card. That's all that guy does. Local instance of a credit card. Then I'm calling cores add credit card CC. And what this guy is currently doing is he's coming in here and he is adding a credit card. What credit card? Whatever you passed me. And all he's doing right now is he's adding that guy to the end of the local link list and then notifying our array adapter that that dude changed. It's not actually writing to the database. Do I have a reference in here? Doesn't look like that was part of the homework, right? Create those references. Okay, so let's do it while we're talking about this then.
So you probably have references in main activity. So, and I just took mine and moved them to core.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it right now. Yeah, so we'll solve the problem at the same time as I'm explaining this stuff.
Hint. So I was like, all right,
Yeah.
let's get these in core.
What's this?
Let's see.
I thought you weren't paying attention to class.
It's like
So the crazy part is I am paying attention.
Yeah. You didn't watch my videos over and over again?
Ish.
It's like binge watching Netflix.
Just hey, I felt proud of myself because instead of bringing you soda last week, I was the only one making that view counter.
So the worst part about this whole thing with Ani is that, like I really respected what she said last week. Would you rather me be on Facebook? But I can't decide if I hate her.
You know the thing. I
It's like, look, I'm doing my homework. Would you rather me be on Facebook? Shut up there and teach. That's great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move my references. So I'm going to partially do the homework while we're doing this so we can catch up, whatever. So I already have a couple of database reference crap in here, right? So here is my Firebase database, blah, 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 blah. And here's my credit cards. So I'm going to steal that guy. Actually, I'll just cut that guy from there to give me my other errors. Go into core. I'll slap this guy up here. Okay. It's going to be a pretty good burp on recording there, actually. Was I doing? Oh, you didn't hear it? It's going to be really loud on recording. I just had a pretty good burp. All right, so I got my Firebase database here. I also have my reference for this dude. I'll go ahead and actually, let's dump this reference. This is the blah one that we were writing last time, just kind of when I was showing you this stuff. Dump this, I'll dump this. All right. Now I can add my credit card reference out here, but this is now called core.creditcardref, right? So I moved the location of that guy. But I can put my listener here, that's not gonna hurt. All right, so I just moved my reference. So here's my global database reference. And then here is a reference specifically to the credit card folder in that guy, if you will. And then specifically for that credit card folder, I'm saying I want, am I in, where am I? I'm lost. Ah, here. So specifically for that credit card folder, I want to add a value event listener. So I'm adding an asynchronous listener, a little helper B, worker B, okay? I'm saying, look, I want you to listen for changes to this reference. And anytime you hear any change related to that reference, I want this function to get called. So I can handle those changes. Make sense? And what I'm doing in here right now is, because my top level, we look at that database here, my top level is called, the key is called credit cards. And the values are these weird looking unique strings, unique IDs. If I go through all the children of credit cards, my key value pair will be, this is a key, this is the value, this JSON object. This is the key, this is the value. That's what I'm doing right here. I'm saying I don't want the top level data snapshot because the values of that guy are my unique IDs. What I actually want is all of that dude's children, because his children are data snapshots where the key is a unique ID and the value is a JSON object. The actual object, in this case, it's a credit card object. That makes sense? And then what am I doing? I'm calling add credit card, passing that variable that I built into it. So this is where things got problematic for folks. So when we first run this, right off the bat, if I have a couple of credit cards in here, right? I have my Chase Sapphire, well, both of them are Chase Sapphire, but one's 3,000, one's 2,000, whatever. So when I first run this app, on data change will end up getting called one time as that initial setup when we have the value event listener set up, and it'll say, here's the current state of the database. And what do? For each of those credit cards, I'll build an object. I will call core.addCreditCard. And what does that guy do? Add, well, where's my, I need to be in core. Where? I'm lost. Here, that's this guy. Add credit card. What does this guy do? Adds it to the linked list and then tells our array adapter that the linked list has changed. Notice that he is not writing to the database. Those of you who had infinite loop issues wrote to the DB here. And I'll talk about why that was a problem here in a second. Okay, but right now, when my on-database change happens, I'm getting a dump of the current database, and I'm just adding those dudes to my linked list. And then telling my array adapter, data is updated, make my list view relaunch itself or re-show itself, whatever. Words, whatever. All right, I got that clicked. So right now, this guy should grab those couple of things from my database. Oh, do I actually haven't even have my array adapter hooked up? Let's find out. I don't remember how little I gave you for your homework. But hopefully it was fun. All right, so this guy listens for the stuff. This will call our linked list. I can even do a little system .out.println. Adding value, something like that. So if I go into logcat here and I delete this stuff and I hit play, how many? I only have 3 of them, right? Everybody relax. That's my credit card reference, and my credit card reference already exists here. That guy is my database at credit cards, which is this dude. Okay. So this is where I'm adding my value event listener to that guy. So we're going to say that looks good. Then here is my list view. Here's my loyalty program list view. Here's my credit card. Well, here's my 2 different custom adapters from last class. Here's my custom adapter for credit cards, my custom adapter for loyalty programs. So this should have worked, I would have thought. Let me do a quick print in here. I'll show you the debugger in a few minutes too. I think I showed it to you a couple of classes ago. Why? Oh, this is only gonna take a couple of minutes. Let me make sure that my debugger is hooked up to where I need it to be hooked up. Just make sure I get a nice here printed out here. Okay, there's my here. All right, then we're going to say core.creditCardRef, add value event listener, blah, 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 all this crap. And only when this guy fires is that going to happen. So as of right now, it is not firing. But what if I come into the database? Let me just change this to 2500. That fire now.
You cut system.out.println.here. You took that outside of credit card reference.
I'm still printing out these guys.
Oh, that, okay.
But to your point, I can come in here and print out my data snapshot.
Did you spell the name of the node correct when you attached the
Who knows? Who even knows anymore, right?
I don't know.
I just don't know it anymore. Alright, so this guy is not firing. Why aren't you firing? All right, I have a speculation. This would be really stupid if it works this way, but it is what it is. So inside of main activity, I'm going to go ahead and say core.database. I'll say core. Is core all caps? No, it's lowercase. Credit card row. No, now we're good. So this guy just needs to be imported. Publics. It's called database, and I'm gonna just cut it off here. Well, I'm just giving myself the global variables here in core, and then I'm going to set them in there. So core dot.
It doesn't see core.
Doesn't even see core.
That's weird.
What's wrong with you? I want to copy this guy. This guy's somebody who should be copied.
Something got messed. It's Android Studio.
No, Android Studio is perfect. It's beyond reproach. Okay. Oh, I'm not inside of onCreate, that's why. I need to be in here. You can't write code like that up there. Core dot database equals, actually, since I'm doing that, might as well just backtrack until I get my stuff rewritten. Ah, select. You think you're better than me? 'Cause you might be. All right, so we're going to set those guys up there inside of onCreate just in case core didn't like, well, it wouldn't be core, it'd be Firebase, didn't like me initializing them here. So, now let's see if that listener will fire. Credit card ref, add value event listener, undated change. Very first thing it should call is a snapshot. And this is my 518 dealio, right? And this guy is actually it's for the database. True, that looks good. Two things. Something about that guy doesn't like it. So I'm grabbing all that JSON data, the stuff I talked about here at the beginning. Make sure it knows how to talk to my database, because right now it's not acting like it is talking to my database. Shouldn't actually change anything, but I technically overwrote it. Should have been correct the way it was. This ends up being a stupid Concordia internet connectivity thing. I'm going to be upset. Having problems talking.
I found I could punch Firebase into there and it would bring up some lines of stuff and I'd pop it back.
Well, let me look at this just for... Keep seeing this permission denied thing. Oh, that's good. All right, that looks like reading from database issues. Let's see what my cell signal is in here. Got 1 bar, that's plenty. Mobile hotspot. Big money. We actually checked, are we on the internet? I think we are. At least on the internet there. Okay, so that does not seem to be the issue. OnCreate says, here's my database, here's my credit card ref. I'm going to go ahead and set up that credit card ref with an event listener. My event listener says on data changed. Every single time I see it, print out the snapshot. So at the very least, we should see that stuff. That looks good, that looks good, that looks good. Here's my credit card. Activity main, let's make sure that's a thing. That's a thing. This guy is called credit card list view. This guy is called loyalty program list view. Credit card list view, loyalty program list view. Here's my couple of adapters with my linked lists, and I don't even care if this stuff is showing up or not. That shouldn't make any big difference. We set the adapters for them. It's not crashing, but that doesn't even mean anything because what's most important is this listener dealy thingy.
It shouldn't be your list views though, because you already tested those
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't even care if the list views are broken. At the very least, I should be getting into this on data change thing. At the very least, I should be seeing this.
Right.
So,
I had to reboot Android Studio this morning with that problem.
same issue?
Yeah, it wouldn't connect to my database.
Should do the clear cache and restart thing.
I didn't clear the cache, I just killed Android Studio and revoked it.
Oh, we'll give it the old college try. Does the, yeah.
Last night I had to install Windows updates before I would actually connect to the database, so that was fun too.
It's interesting. It's scary to know it's on a Surface Book too. You're like, oh, it'll work. I hope so.
Shouldn't this thing be closing? Aha!
Kill dash done.
We'll kill off the emulator too, just for good measure. And we're back on Falconet, right? Yeah, it could actually be that'd be an interesting weird problem, because I'm doing multiple classes right now with Firebase, so I wonder if once you have one of them launched up, it's trying to grab, like it's hooked into that particular on it, like caches it weird or something.
It wouldn't be blocking it because Android Studio would it?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I've done this.
Saw like 3 updates on mine in a row. Did a lot of updating today.
I mean, I've done this on campus here, and it's worked fine. So it's. I'm pretty confident this code is reasonable. Yeah, after the database. That'll at least tell me if it's adding to the database. Here, I'm actually going to do this. Just in case there's a weird error happening there. But we'll go ahead and update while we're at it. And our core, here's our add credit card. I'm going to just create a function here called public static void add credit card to Firebase credit card CC, and we will say core dot credit card ref dot push dot set value to CC, and that should actually put it there. So we'll go ahead and try to add a new guy, and if we see it pop into the database, that should at least tell us we're talking to the database. We have 2 dudes in there right now. Not writing to the database. It's going to be really hard to teach about Firebase if Firebase ain't working.
Firebase though. I've got Firebase over here.
And it's working fine on yours?
Yep.
And you're on Falconet?
Yes.
Interesting. Very interesting, actually.
Could it be the item
I would hope not. I mean, it worked before. It shouldn't be a major issue. Are we getting any of this stuff in there?
Is all your file or all of your files on GitHub, including your little services?
This code looks pretty fine. I don't think this is a code issue.
Yeah, I don't think the
I was
code's
gonna say
either.
you could have Mike could clone your project and then see. if it
It's
runs.
my liege.
Mike.
I had students years ago that there's this one guy, big Dungeons and Dragons player, call me my liege.
Isn't it more like sensei?
Sensei. Well, I am a ninja. It's true. Sort of a ninja.
Maybe step away from the code.
Hey, hold on. Is this like crashing over and over again? Let's kill this. Run this. We got all these permission denied stuff. I thought that was related to it's a thing on the Windows one though. I've never seen that on the Mac one. Yeah, these errors look like the Gradle services thing. Channel is unrecoverably broken and will be disposed. Tell me how you really feel. This should have been easy. My code that worked at the end of last class isn't working right now. All right, let's see what this guy says. Primary dex file? What the heck is that? Some apps are not compiled at boot time. Let's do a clean project. Then we'll do a rebuild project. And we'll dump all of that. yeah, it's like related to the. It can't talk to the emulator. It's dying talking to this dude.
Install updates. Install the updates.
Well, I will in a second. When I finally decide to do the updates, then we'll just take a 10-minute break while I install the updates. Yeah, see, it's having issues talking to the emulator.
I got that when I spammed mine with like personal calls to Firebase.
I was telling your friend about my workout today. It's like 20 minutes, like, hardcore. Oh gosh.
All right, so you want me to install the updates? So let's take.
I'm doing it.
We'll take a 10-minute break, and I'll install the updates, and we'll see what it. See.